Their calls for unity are nothing of the sort. Their calls for unity are calls for obedience.
Joe Biden declares war on conservatives.
Mr. Reagan.
Donald Trump. His first week in office was marked by deregulation, downsizing the federal government, and executive orders that put America first. Trump issued 2 memoranda on his first day, rolling back burdensome regulations on small business and on manufacturing. This was an adrenaline injection right into the vein of the economy because Trump was a doer.
We will no longer accept politicians who are all talk and no action, constantly complaining, but never doing anything about it. The time for empty talk is over. Now arrives the hour of action.
He wasn't a think tank guy. He wanted to cut through red tape, and he did so. Trump renegotiated NAFTA and put in place the USMCA, something that even Joe Biden admitted was better than NAFTA.
Something else he did is he renegotiated NAFTA.
He did.
But doesn't he deserve some credit for that? It's better. The USMCA is better than NAFTA.
It is better than NAFTA.
But here's the thing. There was nothing in Trump's speeches that said, I hate the left. There was nothing that excluded any law-abiding American, black, Muslim, gay. Trump didn't exclude anyone with rhetoric or with divisive legislation. Everything he did, everything he said, was warm, welcoming, and inclusive, despite what the fearmongers in the media would have you believe.
What truly matters is not which party controls our government, but whether our government is controlled by the people. At the bedrock of our politics will be a total allegiance to the United States of America. And through our loyalty to our country, we will rediscover our loyalty to each other. When you open your heart to patriotism, there is no room for prejudice. The Bible tells us how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. We must speak our minds openly, debate our disagreements honestly, but always pursue solidarity. When America is united, America is totally unstoppable. It's time to remember that old wisdom our soldiers will never forget, that whether we are black or brown or white, we all bleed the same red blood of patriots. The oath of office I take today is an oath of allegiance to all Americans. I will fight for you with every breath in my body, and I will never, ever let you down.
Of course, throughout the first week of Trump's presidency, much like the previous year and much like the next 4 years, the media ruthlessly mocked him. They said he was the worst thing in the world. They told us that Trump was a fascist and a racist and that he would divide the nation. But he didn't divide the nation. They did. The very media who warned us how awful Trump was, they instead attempted to divide the nation to make their viewers hate Trump and hate conservatives.
We are living through the most dangerous challenge to the free government of the United States in decades. Civil unrest will not be a problem for the Trump presidency. It will be a resource. He and his family are eagerly plunging into a morass of dodgy deals. And authoritarian leaders won't lecture. They will tweet.
The irony, of course, was that Trump would prove to be, despite their delirious rantings, one of the most successful presidents in U.S. history, ushering in the freest, most prosperous era in the history of the country. Joe Biden, on the other hand, could not have had a more opposite week to Trump. The media has treated Biden as some kind of messiah figure.
Joe Biden respects government. He respects people who disagree with him. He listens to them.
I think that Joe Biden is going to train us to see the world differently.
He plans to usher in a new era of hope the minute he takes office.
We've gone from indecency to decency. What a great love story between Jill Biden and Joe Biden. We haven't had a love story in the White House in 4 years. It's just a different kind of marriage. This is a love match like the Obamas were. So I think that'll be healing for the country, too.
You know, he spoke from the depth of his soul, and we needed this. There was not one part of that that wasn't just medicine in the wound.
He filled that
empathy void.
He is the better angel president. Joe Biden believes he's eternally optimistic. He's not cynical.
Those lights that are just shooting out from the Lincoln Memorial along the reflecting pool, it's like almost extensions of Joe Biden's arms embracing America.
It's honestly been disgusting. Maybe they think if they talk Biden up enough that people will believe that Biden was a good choice. Sadly, some actually will. That's the Democrat Party electorate. It's a demographic one might categorize as gullible Americans. But despite Biden's nauseatingly saccharine treatment by the press, he's signed some appallingly disastrous executive orders, and he's issued some frightening statements. But there's one thing that Biden has said, I believe, that has indicated that he plans to systematically persecute conservatives. I'll explain why I believe this in one moment, but first, of course, I have to sell you something. One of the first commitments made by the new administration is the $2 trillion spend on environmental concerns. With renewables like solar panels, wind turbines, and even the batteries from electric cars, the use of silver will soar. But we don't actually have enough silver to cover the demand. They said it would take 5.62 million tons of silver to meet all of our energy needs. The world's current known official silver reserves, that can be assumed to be recoverable from mines, is estimated to be less than 600,000 tons. But that's actually good for investors and for the price of silver. If you're thinking of an IRA or a 401k, now is the time to look at silver. And this month, with every gold or silver IRA, they're giving away one of these incredible 5-ounce solid silver Apollo 11 memento coins with every IRA that's started. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com right now and find out more about future-proofing your investments. Now, before I talk about Biden's stated intention to persecute conservatives, I would like to discuss something that I haven't yet seen reported in the news. On his first day on the job, Biden required his entire staff, everybody in the executive branch, to sign an ethics pledge. In this ethics pledge, I kid you not, everybody had to declare that they would not exploit their position for personal gain. I read that and I was legitimately shocked, jaw dropped to the floor. Because Joe Biden, exploiting political office for personal gain, that is precisely what you did throughout your entire political career. The hypocrisy is mind-boggling. The audacity of these people is an affront to every decent American. Next thing you know, we'll be drawing up an executive order to ensure fair and honest elections. Wouldn't that be just hilarious? So now on to the more serious concern. Biden has recently called for unity under his presidency, and he's also declared war on white supremacists.
And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit. And each of us has a duty and a responsibility to defend the truth and defeat the lies. A rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism that we must confront and we will defeat.
I heard a declaration of war against white supremacy and against the lies that brought our democracy to the brink.
Fine, go to war with white supremacists. I think there's 6 of them still left in the country. But again, here's the problem. If you recall, the left does not identify white supremacists as, say, members of the KKK or self-proclaimed neo-Nazis. People who you would ordinarily classify as white supremacists. No. To the left, a white supremacist is anyone who voted for Trump. Republicans, conservatives, devout Christians, basically anyone they don't like. I'm pretty sure Ben Shapiro, a Jew, and Candace Owens, a black woman, have both been called white supremacists. You will remember that Biden famously named the Proud Boys as a white supremacist organization.
What do you want to call them? Give me a name.
White supremacists and
who would
white
you like me to condemn?
White Proud Boys. My message to the Proud Boys and every other white supremacist group is cease and desist. That's not who we are. This is not who we are as Americans.
The leader of the Proud Boys is Cuban. So when Biden says he's declaring war on white supremacy, does he mean white supremacy or does he mean all conservatives? Given the left's persistent false claim that Trump was sounding dog whistles and given their propensity to accuse conservatives of doing precisely what they themselves are guilty of, we can safely assume that the left does use dog whistles, that Biden's call to war against white supremacists was one of those dog whistles, and what he really means is all conservatives. That's a pretty dire message. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about Biden's call for unity.
Unity. Unity. Uniting to fight the foes we face: anger, resentment and hatred, extremism, lawlessness, violence. With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs.
Now, let's be realistic about Biden's speeches. Firstly, he doesn't write them. He doesn't even know what he's saying most of the time. So whoever it is that's expressing these ideas, they're not talking to conservatives when they call for unity. This is a show that's being put on for the sake of Democrat voters. When Biden calls for unity, that has been put into the speech so that Democrat voters can think, we voted for the right guy. We voted for the good party. We voted for the party of unity. This is the party of integrity, of dignity. We're the good guys. The call for unity, that's not really put in there for us. That's not really put in there because they genuinely want unity. Because look at the difference between the rhetoric and their actions. They say they want unity, but they're doing nothing legislatively that has anything to do with unity. There's nothing that they're doing that's like an olive branch of any kind. The Democrats have claimed that Republican congressmen conducted reconnaissance missions before the, riot on the Capitol. They're accusing Donald Trump of inciting an insurrection.
And here we stand, just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground.
So Wednesday, as we know, was the president, frankly, assisted by members of Congress, incited an attack on the United States Capitol. This is known as an act of insurrection, an act of sedition. And frankly, he is a traitor to our country, a traitor to the United States. And many members of Congress were almost murdered.
They're going out and targeting good Americans who casually walked around the Capitol building on that day. And they're trying to arrest them and put them in prison. These are not calls for unity, guys. All right. When they put that into the speech, that rhetoric is intended specifically for Democrats to think they're good people. It is not intended for us. All right. So pair that rhetoric, that call for unity that he's using to talk to the left, pair that with the war he's declaring on white supremacy and his painting of all conservatives as white supremacists. It's then easy to decode the propaganda here. Democrat voters get to hear we're the good guys, whilst the message to conservatives is we're going to hunt you down. To be honest, the call for unity, it's just offensive. It's widely believed, even by 30% of Democrat voters, that the election was crooked, that you stole it. And now you're calling for unity? It's shocking that anyone would buy this at all, but Democrat voters really are that gullible. This is how con men manipulate their victims. They leverage goodwill, politeness, and the propensity to forgive. This is how despots manipulate Christian nations. Sure, we doctored the vote. Sure, Biden enriched his family through corrupt dealings in the Ukraine and in China. Sure, the president is now compromised by foreign powers and crooks run the federal government. But you're Christians. You should forgive us. But that's not how it works. If you punch me in the face, I'll probably forgive you. But if you punch my wife in the face, I'm going to rip your head off. And subverting the will of the American people, well, that's like attacking my wife, my parents, my nieces, and my nephew. You think I'm just going to turn the other cheek? You think we're going to unify after that? Think again, The thing about the left is that they're arrogant, and they severely underestimate conservatives. They basically think that they're all brilliant and that we're all idiots. And it may be that very quality, their arrogance, that will destroy them. This is, in fact, one of the very few things that still gives me hope for this country. Leftists are getting greedy, and they're expecting that we'll all just go along with their idiotic ideas. They don't realize that their ideas are terrible and they're bound to fail. They arrogantly think that their ideas are brilliant, and that we're all just too stupid to understand them. It's like when leftist politicians insist that we defund the police, and they think that the only reason that we don't go along with it is because we're poor, ignorant, white conservatives, and we just don't recognize how big of a problem systemic racism is in America.
Growing inequity, the sting of systemic racism. We can deliver racial justice, and we can make America once again the leading force for good in the world. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all are created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer.
Of course, when the police are defunded and they find that crime mysteriously goes up, well, they end up having to assign police officers to guard their houses individually because they need to be protected. And yet, despite countless examples just like this, examples where they are totally wrong, the left continues to believe that they're right about everything. And we're just thick-headed Neanderthals that have to be forced into compliance. And how do they force us into compliance? Well, first they deny us a fair election, then they strip us of our First Amendment rights and various other civil liberties because of a sensationalized virus. And then they call for unity. But their calls for unity are nothing of the sort. Their calls for unity are calls for obedience. But unlike the left, we will not take a knee. Another phenomenon of the left that gives me hope is cancel culture. Leftist ideas are narrowing further each moment of each day, and the left is becoming less and less tolerant of any kind of dissent by anyone, especially by other leftists. Obama was against gay marriage when he first took office. If he expressed those same views today, he would be called a bigot and he would be canceled. We're seeing this with people like J.K. Rowling saying that there are differences between men and trans dudes. She was attacked for that. Feminists and trans activists are now in a battle over women's rights versus the rights of dudes with lipstick. Black men are being abandoned because they're male. White women are being abandoned because they're white. This fractioning of the left will likely destroy them. You have a bunch of competing groups, and now that the left is in power federally, well, these groups will begin to fight for their piece of the pie. They'll begin to accuse each other of not being woke enough. And as is the trend today, each will try to cancel the other. As Christ noted, if Satan casts out Satan, he's divided against himself. How shall then his kingdom stand? And so, I have hope. Well, that's it for me. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just they know so much. That is not so. Good night.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.